Well, thanks for being with us here on Morning Live. Power utility Eskom can no longer be able to disadvantage end users by cutting off electricity supply due to non-payment by municipalities. Now, this after the Constitutional Court denied Eskom's application for leave to appeal in the Resilient case, upholding the ruling by the Supreme Court of Appeal last year. Now, the latest developments will see the power utility further struggle to get payment from municipalities, which are owing an estimated 36 billion rand across the country. So for more on this story, we joined on the line by Piet le Roux, who is the CEO of Sakeliga, which was a friend of the court in this case. Piet, good to speak to you. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you. Good to speak to you.
So perhaps as an introduction, if we could just briefly go back and if you could just give us a little bit of background to this particular case and how we got to the point where we are.
Yeah, the viewers might remember that around 3 to 4 years ago, it was common for Eskom to cut power at a large scale to municipalities in bulk when the municipality failed to pay the money it was obliged and owed Eskom to Eskom. The problem with that setup was that Eskom was actually using the paying end users in those municipalities, the businesses and the members of the community who paid their electricity, as leverage to force the municipality to pay the money to Eskom. But it was a vicious circle, and as the court eventually found, was irrational, because by cutting power to a municipality in this way, you're destroying the whole economy of the town, and there's no way that that will lead to a better state of affairs where the municipality can pay. And moreover, the court found that it's not acceptable for two organs of state to make their internal dispute the problem of third parties, private third parties, end users, and so on. So it was a common situation 3 years ago. People were getting interdicts against this, and it was costing everybody all around the country a lot of money, and eventually this Resilient case now resolved that.
So, Sakeliga, how do you get involved in this particular matter? What was your interest, and how many other role players were involved in the case?
We're a public benefit organization, and our purpose is to make sure that the business environment is conducive to good business. So everything we do, we measure against that. And it was obvious to us that at Sakeliga that the energy situation in towns across the country is dire, and it was a big risk. So the first risk was that if you destroy these towns, you firstly destroy that local economy and the community, but then you will only transfer the pressure that municipality was only able to handle to the metropolitan areas, because the businesses and the members of the community will move to the metropolitan areas, and that will increase the pressure there. So there will be a cascading effect on service delivery, and then there will be a cascading failure toward municipality, toward the fiscus, because we need, if Eskom doesn't get paid and the municipalities keep falling over, then we will have a situation where the government, who stands guarantor for all these debts, will state fiscus will implode. So we got involved from a business perspective because we need to make sure that the business environment is conducive to a flourishing community. But I could add that.
Please go ahead.
Let me just add quickly to that. 2, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when these things were happening, we, Sakeliga and others, were getting interdicts after another, one interdict after another, preventing this from happening. But all these interdicts were short-term relief, and we realized that it was important to get more medium-term relief to prevent this structurally, so that not every town and every chamber of commerce across the country need to spend millions of rand getting interdicts. And so we looked at these cases. We saw the Resilient case. We realized that the Resilient did good work there, but that we could add to the arguments before the court. We brought then these arguments of intergovernmental dispute resolution and the irrationality of Eskom's actions, and the court found that, as the High Court put it, this was dispositive and novel, and that eventually, in our view and the court's view, was swayed the case toward what we have now, which is a more medium-term solution.
So let's look at the implications of the court ruling, because what we found is that, as you say, 3-4 years ago, this perhaps more of a problem, but still you have municipalities in this country where people are still suffering a load reduction, power cuts, 3-4, however many times a day. And I remember about 2 weeks ago, I think it was the community in Bethel in Mpumalanga, they actually took to the streets because they were protesting that at some points they would go without power for the majority of the day. So what exactly are the implications of this particular finding by the court?
Yeah, the energy problem, the electricity problem in South Africa is very big. We've solved now at a medium term one large chunk of this, but it doesn't solve all of it, unfortunately. There's more necessary, and I'll tell you what we're doing on that level. But we're still going to see power cuts because of the distribution networks in some of these towns imploding, the transformers exploding. Those things are going to keep happening, so we're going to still see towns experience power failures in that way. We're also going to see still municipalities and towns experiencing power failures with reference to some of the load reduction that Eskom does. We think our judgment also prevents some of the load reduction tactics that Eskom has been using. But still, if the distribution infrastructure in the town can't handle a certain load, if the town's outgrown what the municipality provided at a distribution level, then it's not Eskom's fault if the distribution network can't handle that. So we're still going to see some of those problems. But for the rest, we're now going to see in the medium term some energy security at a local level. But the problem is that, as we know, one of the key thing here is that municipalities are actually not paying the money that they collect from the taxpayers, from the ratepayers in a community and from the businesses over to Eskom. And the problem lies here with the municipalities failing their obligations of administration and financial administration. And so we're now approaching the court, and this is already undergoing in Northwest, in towns like Vryburg, Lichtenburg, that's Naledi, and Dietsebotla. We're asking the court to introduce a concept of a special master to handle, in the interim, some of these financial matters in the municipality, collect the money, paid over to Eskom, paid over to the water boards, paid over to the sewage company, if that's the case, and then only after the creditors have been paid and the services have been secured and maintained, release the rest to the municipality. So as we see it at Sakeliga, solving the electricity problem must be part of a larger strategy of making sure that municipalities work and that the money that the end users pay reach the service providers.
And quite a few points from that, and I'm glad you spoke about the implications of this on the actual power supplier, because surely this could lead to Eskom falling into even further debt, because somebody has to pay for those services at the end, and inevitably it is going to be the taxpayer. It's going to be you and I who pay for it one way or another bit. So, just in terms of that, it doesn't mean that people are absolved from paying because of this particular ruling.
No, and I think that's why it was extra important to us to get this case in Northwest underway as soon as possible, and why it's already underway, because we cannot allow municipalities who are delinquent, and in those municipalities where the officials don't take the responsibilities that they should and have the accountability that they should have, we don't want to give them a window of opportunity to use this resilient judgment to further postpone their debt obligations to Eskom. Because the risk in that is that Eskom's debt keeps ratcheting up, and as that keeps going up, we must remember that the state, the National Treasury, stands guarantor for the debts of Eskom, and so we're actually only increasing at a very high pace the debt obligations of the country if we allow municipalities to waste or through corruption and otherwise not properly apply the money paid by businesses and communities. So it's really important that we keep the pressure up on the municipalities to transfer the money as they should and to come to terms with their obligations.
And obviously the other part of this is, as you say, you're talking about perhaps having special masters that would look after the money, pay it over to the service provider, such as the water board, such as the power utility, Eskom. So in that instance, for many municipalities, this is one of the best avenues of revenue generation for them, the markup that they get to put on electricity tariffs. So how is this going to work? Because there are other services that also need to be rendered.
Yeah, so the concept of a special master was an initiative of the Constitutional Court, and is actually developed in jurisprudence, and by the Constitutional Court this was agreed that they found that it's appropriate where state institutions completely fall over, as was the case with the Land Claims Court and the Department of Land Administration's ability to handle land claims. The court there appointed a special master to handle some of the administration, saying that, look, it's now been years of failure. These officials have not committed to their obligations. We must introduce something else. So the special master's role will be to collect the money from the taxpayers and the revenue in the accounts of the municipality, but only first pay the key creditors like Eskom and the water boards. Now, if it's true that these municipalities use the electricity tariffs and so on as ways of revenue, so they add a markup to that. But that's not a problem. The markup will then be released for the use of the municipality. We just want to make sure that the money that goes to Eskom goes to the water board, and that the emergency services around that gets paid, and all the rest of the markup still is available to the municipality. This case, that we think the next step is not to take over municipalities. We think the next step is simply to get the key financial administration in place, and then leave the normal budgetary and discretionary constitutional functions of the municipality in place.
You are, of course, also alive to some of the administrative challenges because there are huge billing problems in many municipalities.
Yes, and part of the special master's work could be to sort some of that out if the court finds that agreeable. Look, it's important that some of these to realize the extent of failure at some of these municipalities. The Auditor General reports on some of these municipalities in Northwest, for example, that he tells us how much corruption, to, let's say, 500 million rand in some of these municipalities. I'm just making up a number. He would say that, but the Auditor General would just put a disclaimer there saying that he's actually only reporting that which the municipality is telling him is their wasteful expenditure and corruption. He's unable to verify it because there's not a financial administration system in place any longer. And so that's the extent of failure at these municipalities, and the special master really is the appropriate way to deal with this complete collapse of administration.
So just in conclusion, Piet, so this particular ruling in terms of the towns that are currently seeing these power outages because of the power supply and it being interrupted because of the municipalities owing Eskom, what does this mean for them today? Does it mean that...
I think it saves them a lot of money. It means that Eskom realizes now what the court, how the court sees this tactic of them. And Eskom has, I think, has already started changing tactics, and we've seen more rational strategies from them developing. We welcome that. At Sakeliga, we think it's very good that Eskom is looking at other ways of debt collection. But for the towns and for the business chambers in these towns, it means saving millions of rands in litigation costs, and it means not having to worry about power cuts in bulk because the municipality cannot comply with its administration obligations. And so it secures also the local economy in towns across the country. We have over 200 municipalities. I think this judgment, and I'm proud to say Sakeliga's role in this, secures the economic functioning of these towns to, not completely, because it doesn't solve the whole problem, but it's good middle-term relief for a large chunk of the problem.
And is this immediately effective, Piet?
This is immediately effective. Some judgments we expect that were put on hold pending the outcome in Resilient can now be resolved. If even Eskom chooses to further pursue it, it depends on the nature of the cases and where they are in the processes. But we think that for all practical purposes, now towns and businesses in towns across the country can rest secure. Eskom's not going to cut their power summarily when the municipality owes Eskom money.
Piet le Roux, thanks for your time. Piet le Roux is the CEO at Sakeliga, which was a friend of the court in the Resilient case. And ultimately, what this resulted in is power utility Eskom no longer able to punish end users for municipalities not paying their accounts to Eskom. But of course, as you heard from Piet, it is applicable immediately. However, you may still find yourself experiencing power cuts because of other issues such as infrastructure problems. So it's going to be interesting to see how all of this plays out. But that's where we're going to leave that. It is just about 7 o'clock.